Hello, my name is Slavomira Harcegova and I'm author of Method, Art of Life, or in Latin, Ars Vivendi. And today I'm so happy that I have with me Steve Gallegos, which is therapist, and I would like let him to introduce. So, hi Steve.
Hi, Mrs. Slavomira. Thank you very much for inviting me.
I'm happy that you accepted.
I'm honored.
Can you please explain what are you doing, how you help people, which therapy is yours?
Well, it might take us a few weeks, but we can start. I help people by helping them come back to the place where they trust themselves. And there's a place deep inside that is very trustworthy. Unfortunately, when we're trained and schooled and taught and everything, we learn to come away from that and to become kind of a presentation of some sort, rather than remaining there in that deep place. It's a place we go to, for example, when we meditate, and it's a place that is usually other than the place where we think, which is usually on the surface. And so if I can take just a minute and sink myself down into that place, and it's the place also that I work from when I work with somebody. And what I try to do is help them meet me at that level, and there we go on our adventures. And the adventures are unique for the person. It doesn't depend on me, it depends on them and what they need to connect with within themselves. It's a place that is, I call it the place of the deep imagination, because it's a place in us where knowing or knowledge presents itself as pictures, and it's deeply alive. And this is how it differs usually from the realm of our thinking. Our thinking is usually very trained, and we learn thoroughly how to speak, how to present ourselves, how to think, especially logically. And this other place is a place that has a deeper, more ancient lineage and anchor in who we are. We could put it this way. We have a history that we remember. Okay? What happened to me, what I learned about myself when I was born, my name, my family, the place I grew up, all of those things. And that's usually kind of what we present as biography. But then there's an ancient place where my aliveness comes from. And that aliveness is ancient. We're told by scientists that our aliveness is over 3.5 billion years old, and it's been there continuously, passed on from one aliveness to the next, to the next, to the next, without a break, until it appears in us. And it's taken this particular form that we have here of a body, this particular kind of brain, the way we've learned to experience the world and be in it and know it. And so that realm is where I work. And that realm knows things about me that my thinking doesn't know, that my memory doesn't know, that my what I've learned about myself doesn't know. It's a much deeper place that knows me from this place of ancient memory and ancient wisdom. And so what I do when I work with somebody is I help them return to that place and reconnect with it. Because one of the injuries that we've sustained is the fact that we have disconnected from that realm, and we've learned to be mostly rational, logical, scientific, and so on. And yet it is the realm, let's say, where most animals live, where they do their living. We can train them to be different. We can train them to put on acts. We can train bears to dance and monkeys to do tricks. But then there's this deep place where the knowing comes with them in who they are and how they interact and how they get along with each other. And it's a dimension really of experience. And so that's the dimension that I work with. So it's beautifully alive, and that's one of the first aspects of the work that I do, is reaching for that aliveness that's there And what we find when there's injuries or when there are difficulties that people have emotionally or in their lives, there's been some kind of a disconnection from aspects of their own aliveness. Or people have learned to separate one aliveness from another so that they don't work together in coordination and in conjunction with each other. Every part of us is supposed to be in harmony with every other part. And we lose that harmony. And so a lot of times we are busy thinking, what am I supposed to do here? I'm being interviewed, what will I say? What can I come forth with, and so on? How can I entertain you or an audience or something like this? And that's really not where I need to be. I need to be in a place of communicating relative to a place in people where this ancient wisdom, this ancient knowing exists still. And as I say, most people have learned to disconnect from that place. So my fundamental job is to help them come back and reconnect with that. A lot of times they've already lost their trust in it. They don't believe it. They think, oh, am I making this up? And am I lying? Or what will people think of me when I say what I'm seeing? And things like that. And so they learn to, we could say, produce themselves in a certain way for an audience, rather than remaining in their aliveness, deeply connected to who they truly are, and trusting the awareness that's there. Okay? So that's what I do. That's how I work. It's a little difficult to explain because I have to explain it in words and logic and language, and it's deeper than that place. You could think of it more like a place where animals live. Animals that haven't invented words the way we have, and fallen in love with words and with literature, and thinking that literacy is the epitome of our evolution and things like that. But it's not the epitome. It's one element, one aspect, one dimension of the way we live. But there's a much deeper place that is still connected to our aliveness. And that place knows everything about us. It knows where we've been injured. It knows what in us needs to heal. It knows what in us is ready to ripen and grow and find new expression and fundamentally come forth into the world in a different way and encounter the world in its freshness, the way a little baby encounters the world, brand new. What's this? What's this new space that I'm in? I used to be in a place that was very juicy and where I was completely held and I didn't even have to nurse, but now I'm in this strange kind of cool place. I need to go explore it. So there's this kind of wonder in them of this new place. What do I do with it? How do I find my way around? I can hardly move. First of all, I need to nurture myself. And so I look for this source of nurturing, which is usually a very nice plump breast, if I can find it, and nurse on it, and it feeds me what I need to eat. And then later on, I get a little tired of that, and I see other people chewing on different things. Oh, I want to try some of that. And so we wander out and start exploring. And one of the things that happens is we come out and our awareness extends itself out into the space around. And that awareness draws us and pulls us out to meet this new world. And we just want to get out there and say, what's this? Let me go touch it. Let me go taste it. Let me go feel it, and so on. Little animals are the same way. They look around in wonder, and they see a brother or a sister there, and they reach out and touch them, and they stay in a place where they usually feel safe and secure. But at the same time, there's this yearning or this draw that pulls them out into a bigger world. For us, what it is, it's our awareness reaching out. And we lose sight of the fact that our awareness is a growing dimension of who we are. And like a hand, it wants to reach out and touch. It wants to reach out and touch and look at some of the titles of the books over there. Or look at this samovar. I presume it's a samovar that's over there. And your painting's over here. It's drawn outward. And this is the way we grow. We fill the space around us with our curiosity. And that's totally natural. And any animal grows in that way as long as it's feeling safe while it's doing the reaching. Okay? And usually the parents or the adult animals that are around it keep it safe, at least to a certain degree, and make sure it doesn't get into too serious trouble as it wanders around. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it gets injured. We do the same thing. One of the problems that we have is that very quickly after we come out of the mother's womb, people try to teach us words. And we start learning to convert our experience into words and concepts and ideas and maps of what things are like that people have taught us, but that don't come from our own experience. And so our experience is the place where we grow. It's also the place where we can be injured. And it's also the place where we can heal. And I've worked a lot with people who say, oh, this happened to me when I was a little child, and I know you can't change the past, so there's nothing that can be done about it. And I say, it's not the past that needs to change, it's your experience of what happens that needs to have a different encounter with the world. And when that new experience comes forth, then the old experience of being injured changes. And there's a whole new experience of new possibility, of new potential there. And what we need to do is find the route for getting there into that new experience so that the healing you need can happen. Now, I don't know what that experience is, but there's a place in them that does know what it is and that can guide them into it and through it and to find whole new dimensions of who they are that they maybe haven't had the security to explore on their own, or maybe they try to explore and they have these words of mother or father that say, don't do that, don't go there, or they've been punished, or teachers that try to form them in certain ways. There are cultures that allow the child to discover itself. Okay? And the American Indian culture is one of those. The child is allowed to go out and discover who it is. And the parents are curious about it. What have you discovered about yourself today? And so that's a very exciting way to learn rather than going to school. You don't have somebody else trying to replace our knowing with their own, okay, and building similar maps. So we have people growing through experiences that belong to them. And it's an opening up of who they are through the extension of this awareness that has this fundamental, we could say it's a curiosity, it's a need to explore, it's a yearning to find out about those things that are out there. And so what I do is I help people get in touch with the part of themselves that knows, which is very alive still. They may have to relearn to trust it again, because a lot of times we've learned to distrust our own inner knowing and replace it with the teachings of someone else. Okay? And it's, in a way, very simple work, because all I have to do is help the person stay connected to the deeper knowing. And the difficulty is that the knowing that's been trained into us has covered over a lot of that. And so they have to return to a place of trusting the deeper knowing and respecting it. And a lot of times we've learned to disrespect it. We've learned things that we say about it, like, that's not true, or it couldn't be, or you're making it up. And very quick sentences like that, they come to almost everyone when they meet this inner dimension. For me, this inner dimension shows up as animals. And the question is, why does it show itself as animals? And the conclusion I come to is, animals are the most alive thing we know of during our lifetime. So why wouldn't it be alive? It's the most deeply alive part of who we are. And we've tried to replace it with something more mechanical that's predictable and maybe more secure and not as risky and so on. But at the same time, we lose a dimension of our originality and our creativity when we give ourselves over to that. And then what we do is kind of an imitation of someone else rather than a real exploration of what do I know within me. I think often of this artist, his name escapes me right now, who was taught and was skillful his entire life until he realized there's nothing I can learn from anyone. I can paint exactly like this person over here. I can paint like this person over here, this person over here. I've learned all I can learn. What do I do now? The only thing I can do is learn from myself. And so he then originated a whole new pathway in art. His name was Picasso. And he started doing these strange things that, of course, weren't art because there were these weird figures and strange people and positions and forms with one eye over here, another eye over here, and not the typical standard body that people were used to painting. But he came to that place where he said, I can only learn from myself by going beyond the teachers that I've had. And so in growing, this is what I help people do, to go beyond the teachers they've had and trust themselves once again in terms of where do I need to go now in myself, with myself, in the direction of my aliveness. And life then becomes very exciting. Again, it's not old, it's not boring in any way. It's always a challenge and always an invitation to something new, whatever it is. And people tend to stay much younger when they do that, rather than getting frozen in more or less a consistent pattern that they tend to follow. The place I met this myself was in some imagery that came to me spontaneously, where animals showed up in what are called by the Hindus the chakras. This inner dimension that they call energy, or a wheel of energy, or something like that. And it came to me as animals. There was an animal in each of my chakras. They showed up spontaneously. And I was kind of astounded by them. I didn't expect them. They were just there. And two of them showed up, a bear in my heart and an eagle in my forehead. And I turned to them and I said, where are the rest of my chakra animals? Just spontaneously. And they said, oh, we're here. And they all gathered around me. And there was one for each chakra. And each one was a different animal. And the interesting thing is that the root animal, the one that is the first energy, the first aliveness that shows up in you, which is the stance that you take on the earth shortly after you're born, the security that you have in being present in whatever situation you're in, it showed up and it was a little rabbit. And as soon as they were all there, they sat in a circle, and I was sitting in the circle with them, just spontaneously, just watching, what is this, what's going on? And the little rabbit turned to all of the other animals that were all big animals. There was a deer, there was a horse, there was a bear, an eagle, and so on. And it looked at each one and said, you're all such big, strong animals, and I'm just this tiny little rabbit, this weak little rabbit. I don't belong here with you. I need to leave. Okay? It said that spontaneously. And there came back to me a memory of a time when I was 5 years old and I had started school. And I started out in kindergarten, which was a small class, 12 kids. And we did playful things and had fun, and they were all my friends. And after I'd been in the kindergarten for several weeks, the teacher came up to me and said, you're too smart to be in kindergarten, even though I was only 5 years old. You're too smart to be in kindergarten, you belong in the first grade. And she took me by the hand, led me out of that room, down a long hallway that I still firmly remember, opened another door, took me inside. There were 30 children in there, all bigger and older than I was, and none of them were my friends. They were all older than I was. And sat me down in a seat and left me there. And the feeling that I had, just profound, was, I don't belong here. I need to leave. I need to get out of here. This isn't my place. And this is exactly what the little rabbit was expressing. And it brought back to me this memory of the first grade, which I had totally forgotten. I hadn't thought about it in over 40 years. And I was there astounded, because I said, how could I forget something as important as this? Because I started realizing that has been with me my whole life. The feeling I don't belong here. I belong somewhere else. Okay? So after the little rabbit had spoken to these animals, each one in turn spoke to the rabbit and said, you do belong with us. You are one of us. We want to support your growing until you're as big and as strong as we are. And so each animal spoke in turn, and as each one spoke, the rabbit grew a little bigger, then a little bigger, then a little bigger. And by the time they'd all spoken, the rabbit was here, sitting, big rabbit like that, very still, very calm, feeling like it belonged. And while it was growing, I had felt draining out of me this old feeling that had been there from the time I was 5 of, I don't belong here. It was gone. And I realized that feeling had been there all the way through school, even through my Ph.D. program. As I'd go into a class and I'd feel, I don't belong here. This isn't where I need to be. I want to leave. But I didn't leave. Just like I couldn't leave when I was put in the first grade. And so I understood these animals know things that I don't know. They know things I've forgotten totally. They know where this injury was in me, and they've healed it in just a few minutes. They are the therapists, not me. And if I learn anything, I need to learn from them. So I went to work the next day. I was already working as a therapist. And I told the first person that came in, it was kind of out in the countryside where I worked, a little village. And I said to the first person who came in, who I'd already seen several times before, I said, today we're going to do a different kind of therapy. So just sit there in the chair, close your eyes, focus your attention in your heart, and ask if there's an animal that can come visit you in your imagination, out of your heart. And there was an animal there immediately. And I went through all of the chakras, and an animal came from each one. And these animals together knew things about the man that I didn't know and that he didn't know, and also how to take care of them really in no time at all. And so I started only working that way, kind of secretly, naturally. And I was astounded because they showed me that they knew things that I didn't know. They knew things the person didn't know. They knew what needed to be healed, how to go about it, and so on. And they were very skillful and at ease. They were relaxed doing that. There was no problem with it. It wasn't a big setup or, this is psychotherapy or something like that. It was just, they were at home there, comfortably. He was talking to them, and I watched people change. And it was quite astounding because some of the changes were quite profound, and some of the changes had been long in needing to happen. There was one woman, for example, because I didn't know anything about this stuff, so I was just kind of exploring it myself. And she was a woman that I had inherited in my therapy practice, and because someone else had worked with her for 10 years, and the therapist had left, and so who's to take her on? They sent her to me. Fine. And I got to know her. I'd only known her a couple of weeks, and I knew that she had been depressed, deeply depressed for a long time, and I didn't know what was going on with her. I didn't know that anyone else did. She didn't seem to know, other than that every day she was depressed. And so I took her to visit these animals, and every animal was there very much, except in her heart there was a dog that was dead, and it was in a cave. and it had been dead so long that there was a green fungus growing on it already. And I was very concerned because I didn't know what that meant. And my first thought was, does this mean she's going to commit suicide? And so in my concern, I had her invite the animals very quickly, because it's not mine to direct, but I can help her orient in such a way that she begins the communication with them and sometimes follows my suggestions, or if it doesn't work for her, not to follow them. It's not a demand that I bring forth, but a possibility of her relating to them. And so she invited the animals to meet, and they all gathered together in the cave where the dog was dead. And they stood around the cave inside, and I had her ask them what needs to happen here. And suddenly she just started crying, just deeply sobbing. And she says, there's a little baby here. And I said to her, ask the baby who it is. And she said, it's a baby that I aborted when I was 18 years old. I was living at home, I wasn't married, my parents would never have allowed that. I couldn't have stayed home, and so I had an abortion. I killed that little baby, she said. And I said to her, tell these animals that are there that you killed that little baby. And they all said to her, you didn't kill it. You did the only thing you could do because you knew you couldn't live at home, that it wouldn't be accepted, and so you couldn't do anything else. You did the only thing you could do at the time. And she said, no, I feel horrible. I killed the little baby. It was my fault. I shouldn't have done that. And it was total self-blame. So I kept her just repeating to the animals, look, I killed that little baby. And they said, no, you didn't. You just did the only thing you could do. And so after a few rounds of this, there was suddenly a 15-year-old boy there. And I said to her, ask who this 15-year-old boy is. And she talked to him for a while. And then she said, it's the baby if he had lived. And I said to her, ask how it's doing. And she talked to it for a while. She said, it says it's fine. It knows I did the only thing I could do. It's not faulting me in any way, and it understands fully. And it's totally comfortable and at home where it is. And so she spoke to it, and then the boy was gone, and suddenly the dog comes back to life. And that was this old blaming, self-blaming had healed in her. And I was really just astounded, because there were things happening I knew nothing about. She had totally forgotten about them. I don't know that the previous therapist had known anything about them, but this thing that had been with her for a long time suddenly healed. And she told me not too long after that, she said, I want to tell you something else. She said, for the past 5 years, every morning when I got up out of bed, I would swear to myself that on that day I would not kill myself. And she had done this daily. And I don't think anyone understood the severity of it. And so I knew these animals know something that is profound and that needs to come into the culture. So my orientation was, people have to know about this. So I started writing immediately and wrote a book. She's included in the book. She gave me permission to write about her, and so on. And so what they showed me was, to me, a revelation and a possibility and tremendous hope there, that we didn't need to have a skilled therapist to work with us. We had to come back to that place that knew and learn to communicate with it again and relearn to trust it. And it knew what needed to happen so that we could heal. And that's the work that I've been doing since then. It's elaborated itself considerably, and I've come to a place where I actually do very, very little, because To me, this realm of the imagination has become like another language that I may not understand it, or I may not understand it fully, but I know how to communicate with people in that language. And when we do that, things happen. And some of the things look even kind of magical, you know, it's like, wow, where's this coming from, you know? Because we really have tried to make everything in our lives scientific and kind of mechanical and logical, and we need to seem to understand it. Whereas a lot of this stuff we don't understand, and that's fine. We don't need so much understanding. We need aliveness. Well, the other thing that I found in doing this work was there are a number of times when an aliveness that should be together has been split apart. And these alivenesses are usually very ready to come back and rejoin together. And there's a beautiful healing that happens when that takes place, because it's like in our thinking, we split something in two. We say of somebody, I love her, I hate her. You know, it's like a total division. But what about the whole dance that goes on within this realm of feelings that we call love and hate? They're not so simply split. That's an idea we have. But when we actually engage in the experience and in the presence with them, there's a whole movement that's more like a dance that happens between us. And out of that dance, then our aliveness connects in certain ways that may seem really kind of magical. It's like they happen spontaneously. And so people change. And sometimes they change really almost abruptly quickly. And I'm always just in awe of what's known in them. People can also work with past generations and go into injuries that might have happened 4 or 5 generations ago that have been handed down through the family on and on again until they are stuck with them. And then they have the opportunity of really going back and finding out what happened originally. Where did this start? What happened that gave it its beginning? And why was it passed down? And what needs to happen now? And can I assume some responsibility for the experience that needs to happen in order for that whole long tradition to change and to heal and to become something much more whole? So the principles that I've come to in the work that I do are, first of all, aliveness. We work with aliveness, not with medicine, not with pills, nothing like that. We search for the person's aliveness. Where is it? Is it buried? Is it hidden? Is it a powerful emotion in front of it that doesn't allow it to be there? Have we protected ourselves in some way from it? What went on that the aliveness is gone? Okay, how do we bring it back? What kind of a relationship does the person need to set up with it, need to establish with it, in order so that it has room to come back and rejoin their presence now, today? So there is the fact then of this integration, this returning to wholeness. Okay? And then there's the principle of balance. Once our alivenesses have come back and rejoined each other, there's a new balance that happens. We have a new center. We're not off balance. We don't accept half of ourselves and reject the other half. That throws us totally off balance. So once we accept who we are completely and fully, then there's this balance. And the aliveness can flow naturally through the entire being, but with care, with acceptance, with love, with a sense of maturity, not doing things rashly, and we get angry at something, so we go do something destructive. But if we get angry at something, we face that anger and say, oh, what's this anger doing here? Why is it so intense? Where does it come from? Why did it show up in the first place? can the energy of it be used for my own growing, for my own becoming more and more whole and more together in terms of my own aliveness?
So there is a big difference by living disconnected and be alive and connected.
A very big difference. And it's a simple difference also, which is very interesting, because it doesn't take that much to become connected again, other than the fact that our ideas have gone off in some other, toward some other place. You know, toward maintaining a disconnection that seems logical, and because it's rational and we understand it. In fact, I think the difficulty a lot of people have with feelings is that they need to understand, why do I feel this way, before they'll allow room for the feeling to be present and to express itself. And if you watch animals, the way animals get along with each other, they live in terms of an awareness of these feelings. And this is what they respond to, this is what they look for in each other. And this is a living energy that is showing itself constantly through them, and they don't take time off to go wonder about it and think about it and reflect on it and find something logical about it. They just jump in. This is where I am. And so they resolve things most times without much injury. We are the animal that injures more than any other animal. We go out and we kill people in mass. We've done that. There's no other animal that has killed off its own kind the way we have. And so part of our own insanity is this stepping away from living the aliveness that's been given to us, which to me is a sacred gift. And it's been misused. We try to use it in training the child to appear a certain way, rather than giving the child room to explore and discover and enter into the feeling of a particular direction that belongs to it in its aliveness.
So what do you think could this disconnection of the people be responsible for the state of our Mother Earth, like we behave to the nature and this greediness and all these things?
The primal communities always think of Mother Earth as alive. So that is also part of their aliveness. In fact, everything is alive for them. We think they're kind of stupid because we're rational and logical. And of course, you know, the sun isn't alive. It's this fire that's burning, you know, and it does this and that and the other. But why would we say it's not alive? You know, our fingernails are alive, even though they don't respond the way other parts of us. Each part has its own function and its own relationship to all the rest. If the sun wasn't up there, we wouldn't be alive. We take in the energy of the sun that brings us our aliveness, you know. I was talking the last few days about the fact that plants have learned to eat light. And they eat light in order to produce the food that then will feed us. What a brilliant thing. Is that something mechanical? Or is it something beautiful? And something holy and sacred? The fact that plants have learned to do that so that we can be fed. You know? And so we have all of these, I think, ideas that have become way too rigid and dead. And I think this is what children also miss when they first start school. There's something dead about school, about going into a classroom and sitting in a desk for 8 hours and doing what the teacher says to do, rather than them really relishing their own spontaneous aliveness and learning from it. And why not? Why do we have to be so rigid about how we want them to appear? And I think one of the things is we have really gotten stuck in our language and in the concepts that we apply to everything. And a lot of people, for example, when we start working, they start out with an idea of what needs to happen or of who they are and so on. And to me, the idea is very, very secondary. The first thing has to be the experience. They have to experience what's going on with them. In fact, when people go into the deep imagination a lot of times, they have difficulty expressing it because they don't really express it. They try to explain it, to tell why and what happened and how it's related to something else and what it means symbolically and things like that, rather than saying, I felt angry, or I was terrified, or wow, I really laughed when I met this little animal there. We had so much fun together, and really being present in that energy that fundamentally is our aliveness. And so to me, that realm of the deep imagination is very closely connected with feelings, okay? And we allow certain feelings, but not other feelings. And we condemn certain feelings in us and say, oh, they shouldn't be there. But we're not told, so what do I do about those feelings? And as I've watched parents and children over the years, what I find is that a lot of parents never allow the child the completion of a feeling. I was in Ireland years ago. I stopped in a little pub for lunch, and this American family came in, and it was a father and a mother and a little girl about 8 years old. And they came in and they sat down at a table next to me. The table was next to mine. And they sat there, and the little girl was angry. She was just fundamentally pissed off. And they sat there at the table, and the mother immediately took out a book and started telling, oh, look at this over here, and trying to distract her from this anger. And she was, I don't know what she was angry about, but she was really angry. And my feeling was, she needs to complete this anger. If she goes through it all the way, it'll come to its natural ending. It doesn't last forever. It's when we interrupt it, then it has to come forth again and again and again. And we find that in certain kind of psychological illnesses, where there's an ongoing repetition of a particular pattern. And to me, it's like this pattern is saying, I need some room to get completed here. I was interrupted. I never got to come to my own ending here. And that's natural for any other animal. It finds its own natural completion, and then things go on fine. So I think we want children to act in a certain way, but we don't want them to feel especially strong feelings. If they have really strong feelings, somehow it scares the parents, especially parents who have not done their own growing, their own maturing, and can't give the child the room that it needs for its own aliveness. And so they are constantly stepping in, trying to control or redirect what's going on with the child, thinking that they understand the child better than, hey, why don't we trust this child's aliveness and let it show us what's going on here? Are we willing to learn? And what I find, or what I have found also with my own children, they're deeply wise. They know. My daughter knew much more than I did about what was going on, and I learned from her. I learned a lot from her, and she was always delighted to teach me. She would come home from school, she'd learned to do something. One time she learned to make little boxes out of paper, and the first thing she wanted to do was show me what she had learned and how to make, and help me make a little box like that and so on. And it was delightful. And she really wanted to pass that on and share it, because for her it was very nice to have done that. And so she wanted other people to be able to do it too, especially her old father.
So what could we do? What changes can we do, like a people? How we should grow the children in another way to let them stay alive?
I think, first of all, we need to give them more room for their own experience and for the parent to value their experience in some way. For example, when a child is angry, the parent can hold the child and say, wow, feel that power that's there. There's so much power in you. Isn't that great? Wow. You know, and to appreciate it and to recognize it and to have the child see it in a different way, not just as something that shouldn't be, but as something that, wow, this is powerful here. I better be a little bit wary of the way I use this, you know, to become more aware of it. I think children need to grow up in more of a natural setting with trees, with grass, with little streams flowing through, with other animals to be with and to have time to formulate their own games. One of the things that's been happening in America recently is children's time is almost totally partitioned out. These 15 minutes we'll have them do this, these 15 minutes, so that even recess, which is supposed to be free time for them to play, is now organized and conducted and controlled. So there's no sense of them being able to do what they need to do to discover themselves in different ways. They always have orders to follow. Was a very famous teacher in New York who wrote a book called, I think it was called Dumbing Down America or something like that. And what he says is, there is one thing we consistently teach our children in school, and that's to be obedient. That is the one thing they learn, to obey. And I think that's tragic. And so we get stuck in a kind of thing where for children trying to grow up, their way of gaining some freedom is to disobey, to go against whatever might even be sensible or logical, and to be destructive. And I think we find a lot of that today, especially with all of the shootings that we have in America, you know. It started with schools, at schools, where kids would come to school and shoot their friends. And so my understanding is, well, something has been killed in these kids that are willing to do that, and they come to school and say, this is where we kill parts of people, or this is where I was killed, and so that's what I'm here to do. And we find that more and more. It's tragic. It really is tragic in America, you know. A place that should have more resources than any other place, but it's gotten all wound up really in the whole commercial realm of what you can sell to somebody or what somebody needs to buy that they don't need. And so it is totally functioning in this scripted way where there are these ways of doing things and ways of being that are totally confining, rather than people being happy, just being out in nature. And I think you find more and more people really wanting to get back into nature. I can step out of my bedroom and I'm right there. I have a river that runs by my house. And there are trees growing around. There's some little animals, always birds, eagles occasionally, that are there. And it just feels so refreshing to be there with nature, rather than living in some apartment where I have to be quiet because the neighbors might get disturbed by it, or I can't flush a toilet after 10 o'clock or something like that. I also live in Europe a little bit of the year. But I think a lot of American cities are very dead. We've killed them. We cement them over. Well, who was that wrote this song about going to pave paradise and put up a parking lot? Yeah.
Yes, so
Joni Mitchell, I think. Yeah.
yes, so it'll be good for us to go more into the nature and stay connected in the
Very
in
much
nature.
so, yes. And to learn from nature. There are things the Native Americans used to do and still do, and I've done them a number of times myself, which are called a vision quest, where you go out and you spend days in nature, maybe with something to drink, maybe not. Never with any food, and are just there, totally without anything else, other than maybe something to keep the rain off of you if it rains, and whatever else is there. And what you start doing is you start appreciating the little ants that come along and walk through the place where you're staying, where you become very aware of what's growing and changing, or of the sunset in the evening and the way the light changes. There's a whole awareness that is very, very fine that shows up again. And you realize, wow, I've gotten away from this kind of unawareness of the beauty that's here just naturally in all of the things that are alive here, including the earth, including the sun, you know. And these are beautiful to be with. And we look at them kind of strangely as if, no, these are natural phenomena, and so they've been explored, and we know that people have discovered that the sun rotates around, the earth rotates around the sun and things like that. And so our thoughts about them have shifted more and more into kind of a mechanical perspective, rather than a view that this whole thing is like a beautiful living dimension that has its own meaning within itself. And it invites me to participate in it. And my job is really just to embrace it and to say, yes, how can I be here? What do I need to do in order to really be a part of this magnificent scene that's here? And I think when children have this, they grow up healthy, and they grow up very finely attuned, and they grow up very sensitive and aware of life itself. I don't even like the fact that we call it life, because life makes it something kind of fixed and frozen. Aliveness is to me the word, because it's like something constantly ongoing. You know, and I'm 85 years old, and when I think of, oh, maybe I'll die soon. Both of my parents died around my age, and maybe I'll die soon. But to me, there's not such a thing as dying as much as moving into a different kind of dimension. And I've started more and more to think of the way we were born, you know, the way we were at one time a single cell that was in our mother when she was born. Our aliveness goes way, way back. And then it was given this chance to grow and change and mature and develop itself when she got pregnant, when our mother got pregnant. And then eventually we changed, and we went through billions of years of change, the equivalent of that in 9 months, and then came out and find this world here that is like a wonder. And we needed to discover more of it ourselves, rather than having people teach us what it is and what it's about and what it should be. And so it's like our schooling has gotten distorted. We've gotten a little confused about what kids need to learn and when. I was quite surprised. I watched a movie recently about the last few years of Shakespeare's life. Beautifully done movie called All Is Real. And I was shocked to see, I hadn't realized this before, that Shakespeare's wife never learned to read and write. His daughters never learned to read and write. Here was the greatest writer that's ever lived, and his own children and wife can't read and write. And I thought, my God, what kind of a world is this? No, their job is to have children, to make beds, to cook, to run a house and stuff like that. The man's job is to read and write. I felt like, God, this is crazy. This is totally crazy. We've distorted things tremendously through what we think, rather than asking, what do we really need?
So, what would you suggest for people, like everyday exercise or something? What can we do every day for improve our connection?
I think, first of all, just start connecting to what there is that's very natural and normal, like sunrise. I get up every morning and I go out on my porch in front of the river, and I thank the universe for all of its gifts. The sunrise, the trees that are there, the birds, and I just give thanks. And deeply, truly, I thank the universe for these gifts. And I'm one of the gifts also. I include myself in that. So it's a thankfulness that's there to start out the day. And I think if we did something as simple as that, it would be a new beginning. Instead, there's the alarm clock that wakes us up, there's a job we have to get to, and it's like our life is already scheduled. It's like school used to be when we went to school. And so I think, first of all, be there with a gratefulness. Here I am. I didn't create this aliveness. Thank you for it. It's come a long, long way to live its way through me now, through this particular form that I call Steve. And the name isn't important, but it's important to be experienced as the aliveness flowing through these muscles, these veins, doing whatever it might do in this brain, and so on. And it all belongs together. It's not to be separated out. And so I need to appreciate it as a single totality. And then that helps me also appreciate other people with whatever their lives bring them. I can watch somebody really working hard and diligently and earning very little money. I say, what a beautiful person that is. Look how hard they're working and how little they have, and how beautiful it is for them just to be alive and do this. And so there's a whole shift, I think, that's necessary in our view of what is worthwhile in the world. We've come to a place now recently where the only thing that seems to be worthwhile is making money. And the more money you can make, the better you are. And so there's a whole distorted sense of what has value. And that's especially true in the United States, and with all of these new businesses that are starting up that want to corral the totality of what's going on, like the internet and all of that. It's great to have an internet, but no single person needs to own all of that and become a billionaire in just a few years because they lay claim. It's like we have let the rules get in the way of our aliveness. And I think that is the main thing that really has taken us away from being able to live deeply and fully and in full appreciation of this whole mystery that we live in. It really is a mystery that we're here and that the universe is so massive and unknown, and we're in the midst of the unknown here, and we can reach so far, and we need to reach far also deeply into who we are, because it's almost like we start at the surface of who we are and reach out, which I think we needed to do initially shortly after we were born in order to find out what's around us. But then we also need to start, there's a certain age, I think, and with me it was around 50, where we have to start reaching inside and asking questions. What's this feeling I'm having? Why is it there? Where's it coming from? What's it about? What's it doing? Can I talk to it? Is it there isolated in some way? And to recognize that the universe is not only out there, it's also inside of us. We're not apart from the universe. It is a part of us. Our being here is a part of the existence of the universe. That in itself is kind of a magnificent thing that we've really kind of ignored. How can we come back to that? How can we help children come back and say, wow, there's a part of you that's magical. What's wrong with magic? Does everything have to be logical and scientific? Isn't aliveness itself something totally magical? Where does it come from? What's it doing here? Are we supposed to cut it into small chunks and arrange it in certain ways? Or can we give it the room it needs to change itself the way it's done for 3.5 billion years? You know, we have thoughts about evolution, but that doesn't mean that's what evolution is. We have changed. Changes happen in us, around us. We've watched the world change even just in the past 100 years. You know, it hasn't been that long since we started flying through the air or rolling along streets. We're in something very, very new and very recent. how can we treat it with a sense of the respect that it's due, rather than thinking, oh, it's this mechanical thing, and so we have to arrange it so cars can drive wherever they want to all over the world. Planes can fly wherever they need to go. Aren't there parts of the world we can just leave and let them grow the way they need to? We're burning down the Amazon forest now, so we can plant things that will sell to China. And why do that? There's this magnificent forest that's been there for a long, long time, and full of mysteries that we're killing, we're destroying them. It's not that much different from somebody in the States taking a rifle into a theater and starting to shoot people. We don't even know who we're shooting when we burn that forest down. So there's a sense of we've stepped into something tragic by not really looking at it earnestly and directly. And we also have ceased to include ourselves as an essential dimension in the direction that the world needs to change in, which is something other than just a financial direction. So I think a lot of the way we've drawn the map of what is real is in error. And we need to start questioning, how do I draw maps of reality? Where does that come from? Is there some reality inside of me that has been left out of the map? How do I include it again? And I think once we help children especially come back and start living from that place of magic, and I don't mean magic in any kind of a tricky way, but of the unknown that changes and manifests itself on and on again, and appreciating that. How can we help them come back to that? And I think it's happening, though. I think there's tremendous hope. I really do. And this is one of the beautiful things about my work. I watch people change daily when I work with them. They change very quickly and very profoundly, and they come home to a place that to them feels, wow, this is a place I've needed to be for all my life. Finally, here I am. This is wonderful.
Wow, so we can finish our talk with something positive and with this hope. And thank you very much. If you would like to talk something like for people to the end of our interview, what is important to understand, or
let me just say that I think we have been trained to aim our awareness outwardly, and we need to really turn it back in and go inside and start exploring our inner world and who we are inside, both in terms of feelings, in terms of imagination, creativity, invention, and come back to that natural place where things grow kind of spontaneously, but with us giving them the nurturing that they need and helping a world blossom in a different direction. Along those lines, I think what I'm seeing in the work that I do is that women are coming finally into their own power. And I see a lot of it happen through injuries that have been there for generations, one after another perpetuated on women, and they're starting to heal profoundly. And I see that also politically in America, that women finally are coming into their own power and saying, we need to have a hand in the direction that the world goes also. And so I think that's a part of it also, is coming back to a place of equality where we respect one another and where we support one another in a positive way, not in terms of control. Control, to me, is a kind of illness that we've stepped into.
so Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
It was
I've kind of wandered around all over the place here, I feel. And sometimes I haven't quite known where I'm going, which is not unusual. But I always kind of find an interest in where I end up anyway, regardless of where I'm aiming.
So thank you very much for your sharing and your
Thank
suggestion
you.
and
Thank you for inviting me.
point of view. I think it could be helpful for you. Thank you very much. Thank you for your attention.
Thank
Bye.
you.